Mirëmbrëma, shikues të nderuar. Sot do zhvillojmë një intervistë me Loren Ahmad of Wimbledon, që është ministri i shtetit të Ministrisë së Punëve të Jashtme të Mbretërisë së Bashkuar dhe përfaqësues special i kryeministres britanike për parandalimin e dhunës seksuale në konflikt. Lord Ahmad po ashtu merret edhe me çështje që kanë të bëjnë me liritë fetare. Lord Ahmad, welcome.
Thank you
here
very
in
much.
Kosovo, and it's a good opportunity to discuss with you an important issues here in Kosovo as well. Firstly, as a beginning of this interview, can you tell us the purpose of your visit here in Kosovo first?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that we have worked with Kosovo over many, many years, and this, again, my visit underlines the importance of our strong relationship in terms of how Kosovo is progressing, in terms of its development, and we are friends of Kosovo. We understand importantly how the economy and how the country must now progress, and we stand very much together with Kosovo to ensure that we can play our part constructively. And it's interesting, my first visit to Kosovo follows what was a very successful summit in London recently, covering the whole of the region, where we saw some real tangible progress on how countries across the region are coming together, and underlining the importance that countries like the United Kingdom are in ensuring the friendships, the cooperation, and importantly, some of the challenges that still remain between the different countries can also be addressed in a constructive manner. So delighted to be here and looking forward to the meetings I've had today. Were constructive, and indeed my program tomorrow.
Lord Ahmad, this is your first visit here.
Indeed.
Is it what you thought in the beginning that you will find here? It's a complex country in the middle of Europe, is it?
Well, complex. There's on a lighter note, whenever I visit any country, people often say, what's your first impressions? My impressions as a minister are often just whizzing past landmarks,
Yes.
with a very dedicated and devoted ambassador quickly explaining to me which the different landmarks are, or me asking questions. But first of all, the one thing I have experienced in all the meetings, be it with ministers and be it with the incredible, courageous survivors of sexual violence I've just met, there's one point I would raise, is the warmth of the hospitality and the reception. It's one which recognises the importance of our relationship between our two countries, and that's been reflected in the people. I judge a country by its people, and the warmth I've received has been noted.
Good, thank you. Let's continue with the issues which are very important to discuss, I think, and you are very good at it. I read your interviews and your discussions with among society in Britain. Let's say Kosovo has a wound that has got to do with the mass rapes of women during wartime. Kosovo has a large number of sexual victims during the war, committed mostly by the Serbian armed forces and paramilitaries. How do you think that this issue should be treated in proper way in Kosovo by society and government?
Well, first of all, if I could just put it in context, we first looked at this initiative under now a colleague in the House of Lords, Lord Hague, who was a former Foreign Secretary, and over 5 years ago he launched this initiative based on what he saw in terms of the conflict right in the heart of Europe, not just here in Kosovo but in Bosnia and elsewhere as well. Victims who were being used, where rape was used as a weapon of war, community turned on community, people, neighbour turned on neighbour, people who had lived together, faiths that had lived together suddenly identified each other as the enemy. Now, it was about addressing the core of those issues, and as we've seen stability come to the region, political stability, it's important we also recognise that there were innocent victims of these heinous crimes, and particularly of using sexual violence in conflict. Therefore, that's why the government in the United Kingdom committed to putting this at the heart and the forefront of foreign policy under then William Hague as Foreign Secretary, and it's continued, and I'm greatly honoured and humbled. But amongst my responsibilities at the Foreign Office is to be leading on this initiative for the Prime Minister, Mrs May. And we approach this in a very pragmatic way of ensuring that ultimately you must put not the victim, these are incredible survivors, as I heard myself in the meeting I've just had with survivors. They're courageous women, but also men as well, who've been tortured, who've endured the worst kind of violation on the human body, rape and worse still. Yet they've not just gone through that, not only have they survived it, they've now become the strongest advocates. And it's important that governments across the world recognize that in recognizing this issue, in recognizing the challenge, that we also put justice and absolute justice at the forefront. And we should do whatever we can in terms of ensuring the mechanisms, the processes, but also the supporting environment is there to ensure that those people who have been victims of these heinous crimes can come forward and actually have the confidence within the system, and we hope in time can look back and say justice was served. And we must ensure that we never forget that there have been some horrendous examples, not just in the conflicts in this particular region, but elsewhere in the world. Yet there has also been progress, as I've seen right here in Kosovo, where for the first time these crimes have been recognized. There is now hope through the compensation that's been provided, particularly to the women who suffered during these crimes. And that hope actually needs to be translated not just for other victims and other survivors within Kosovo and the wider region, but across the world. And it is our aim in 2019 to put these experiences at the heart of an international conference, so we can not just throw focus and put a lens on the challenges we face, but also provide hope.
As you mentioned, you said that we have to encourage them to come forward, which is a problem itself, stigma, for example. How can we overcome this? This is not an issue only in Kosovo. I think it's a worldwide problem.
Yeah. Well, we prioritize stigma, and you're quite right. You can just put yourself for a moment. No one can imagine until they've been through that crime what that is. But just in the context of it, firstly, they've been violated in the worst possible way, and they've gone through that experience. At that time, if you've been through that kind of experience, who do you look to? You look to your own friends and your family, your community, your faith groups. Yet, if you're rejected by them, not only do you have to suffer the horrendous consequences of the crime itself, you then suffer the rejection, the shame, as some would associate with it. We need to ensure that we need to end stigma. To end stigma, you must build confidence within the system. So I'll give you one practical example. Different faith groups, different faith leaders have an important role to play. I was in Iraq recently, in Mosul. I was the first minister there after this despicable organization, Daesh, had been defeated, an organization that's had implications right here in Kosovo as well. I met with the Yazidi community who had been totally dehumanized. Yet one encouraging sign in that grey cloud, that glimmer of hope, was provided by the spiritual leader of the Yazidi community, who actually addressed the issue on the front foot, which was saying, number one, stigma against the woman or even the young man who's fallen to this crime, it isn't her fault, it isn't his fault. And secondly, children born of these crimes, they are not to blame, they are to be welcomed. Now these statements are a start, but they were an important first step in the communities themselves, the families themselves from those communities, recognizing that we should not be embarrassed, we should not put these victims at the back of society. They should be heart and center. If we're truly going to heal society, if we're going to move forward in a progressive way, we need to ensure that they are actually seen as people who've had incredible courage, who've survived these horrible crimes against their person, and now are willing to come forward. And we must play our part in ensuring that we can empower their lives. Are we doing enough?
Are we doing enough?
No, there's always more to do. I think what we've seen, if I can use Kosovo's example, even in the last few years, you've seen the first time the recognition of that these incredible survivors exist, but not only the recognition of their existence, that they need to be supported and compensated. And I just saw some phenomenal examples of some incredibly brave women who've not only taken up the mantle, have set up businesses, have become strong advocates to help other women around them as well. Those are the women we need to put at the heart of providing the solutions. And through those practical steps we can take, and the United Kingdom government plays its part, but it needs concerted effort by firstly the countries impacted by that conflict itself, but equally recognizing that these crimes took place, ensuring justice is served, and yes, compensation is paid to those victims. And we're beginning to see those signs here in Kosovo, and our job as a friend of Kosovo is to encourage that and make sure the justice systems deliver.
Okay, Lord Ahmad, I want to discuss another issue with you, which is a freedom of religion and extremism, which is a major problem nowadays in Kosovo and in the world as well. And I think Britain has got a lot to let's say teach Kosovo about it, for freedom religion especially. Let's say Kosovo has a religion diversity. This country always was proud of their tolerance among religion groups, but nowadays religion is being used as a weapon of extremist groups. What can we do to stop this extremism?
Well, again, very recently I was greatly honoured that Prime Minister May appointed me also as the envoy, her envoy on freedom of religion and belief. And if I could personalise it for a moment, what inspires me about why I believe religion as a force for good? I'm born and bred in the United Kingdom. My heritage is both Indian and Pakistani. I'm Muslim by faith. I used to go to a primary school called Holy Trinity, which was a Christian Protestant school. One day I returned home, we were studying Judaism, and I got home, I was 8 or 9, and I was a bit confused. You know, here I was, a young Muslim Brit, you know, a young boy going to a church school called Holy Trinity, Christian, being taught Judaism.
What is happening?
Yeah, what's going on here? So as all good mothers do, my mother sort of said, Tariq, sit down. She gave me something to eat. It's always a good way of getting a child's mind focused and give them something to eat. And then she said, look, Tariq, when we build a house, what do? We lay the foundation. I got that as an 8, 9-year-old. She goes, after the foundation, we build the walls. I got that bit as well. And she goes, after we've built the walls, we actually put the roof on to that house. I said, indeed. And she said, and there's doors and windows. She said, as a Muslim, as a person of faith, we believe the foundations of our faith are Judaism. Without the foundations of Judaism, the walls of Christianity could not have been erected. And without the walls of Christianity, the roof of Islam would not have completed what we know as the house of Abraham. The other doors and windows are reflections on other beliefs and other faiths, and a reminder to us all individually and collectively. We must look at ourselves to ensure we can effect the change, to bring positive change outside the house. I got it. No conflict, no challenge, that we, through people of faith and none, actually learn from each other, from common experiences, because the common strand of humanity is what unites us. This isn't a complex problem. People make it a problem. Every faith at its inception teaches the same message, one of peace, of humanity, and we need to ensure that we revive this. And there are many incredible voices around the world who are doing just that.
One way, probably the most effective one, you've mentioned, is religion itself, to try and prevent extremism. How can this be done?
Well, first of all, it needs like-minded religious leaders to take a step forward, but also countries to recognize responsibility. You mentioned about the United Kingdom. We're rich in our diversity. People of all communities, of all faiths and none, come together, and we're enriched by that diversity. You yourself have spent time in the UK. You can see it. It's a vibrancy that we have. That's a great strength of any nation, of any people, to bring people together. And religious leaders are actually very well placed to do just that. I could quote examples of progressive leaders. Pope Francis, for example. You know, I had a great honor of meeting him a few months back, and we discussed the issues of challenging extremism, of how we can bring faith as part of the solution, not part of the problem. And we need people. Often they're called the moderate voices. I wouldn't call them the moderate voices. I would call them the true voices of faith, to come together and say, we have our differences, we have our different interpretations, we have our different ways of looking at the world. But coming back to those central tenets of faith, the central tenets of humanity, which is ensuring respect of a contrarian opinion, but at the same time having a debate, having a discussion which may have a different perspective, but actually knowing that's the common humanity that unites us. And that's reflective, and I'm proud to say, of our country. Quite often we're challenged to say, you know, where are the examples of integration? We have challenges of integration. Yes, we do, even in the UK. But you know what? You look at any facet of British society, and you use the word, what can we teach you? We won't want to teach any country around the world. We want to share our experiences. Our journey has been a challenging one. If you look just at the last 100 years. But I'm also proud to be a minister in a country that recognizes meritocracy, gender equality at the fore. You can be of any faith or none, and you will progress. And we need to ensure that shared experience is something we can share around the world.
Yeah, my last question, Lord Ahmad. In order to prevent extremism, governments sometimes take harsh measures to try and control different groups. Measures that sometimes can touch freedom of religion. From your point of view, what are the ways that government can deal with this issue?
Well, there's various elements. You talk about hard elements. We must ensure that a clear and unequivocal message goes out to those extremists, those people who inspire young, vulnerable minds to take up a cause which is so remote from theirs, those who seek to divide us, that there is a united voice against them. That does mean the laws of the country need to reflect and protect religious freedom. You are free to profess, propagate, practice, preach your faith in any way, but any incitement towards violence, any incitement towards hate towards another because of faith or no faith, will be clamped down on. And I think there has to be a legislative mechanism, which we have. But at the same time, there's an important element as well. You must take those faith communities with you. Yes. When we talk about the challenges of the internet, one of the great initiatives we have in the UK is an initiative called Imams Online, where there are different Muslim imams, British-born, who are taking perspectives of different faiths and interpretations. But when the radicals and extremists hijack the noble faith of Islam, they are the voices, not the government's voices. Yes, the government lends its support in the best way we can, but it's the community's voices that act in the most convincing challenge to those extremists who seek to divide us. And I think there's great examples across the world, and we need to ensure that the government's role is one of ensuring that we can empower those voices against the extremists and those who purport terrorism, because only together and through bringing unity can we unite against them.
Lord Ahmad, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.